Hey guys, today I'll be showing you another project I've been working on, and this video is also for M3, who owns this beautiful Memorymoog Plus. So M3 just gonna kind of go over it, show you that everything's actually functioning correctly, and just give you a good overview. I know I've sent you a lot of emails and messages and stuff like that, but it's always good to see the final results here. So anyways, when I got this one in, guys, just a little backstory. So you turn on, it'd power up, but there's no audio whatsoever. Computer interface seemed to be working, buttons seemed to be changing, so I didn't suspect it being a computer problem. I could hit auto tune, and I said it would actually tune 5 voices, which means it was missing voice tuning. So basically what I did, I started kind of backwards on this unit. I started with the audio line. Looked at the voices with the scope, and sure enough they were producing audio on all voices. But when it got to the summing node of what actually sums up all the audio for a master output, there's no audio there. It was getting audio input, but the 3360 that's related to audio, the programmable volume control, was dead. I could see the voltages change when I turned this pot here, and it was actually digitally changing the signal and sending out a CV voltage to the 3360, but the 3360 was just dead. It had audio in, no audio out, no matter what the input control line was doing. So replace 3360, you had audio. Then I started looking at the voices to see why this thing wasn't tuning all 5 voices, whether it be a demux problem or a voice problem. So I started going through the voices, and what I found is that you had a dead oscillator on voice 5. And what it was, it actually wasn't a dead oscillator. I took my scope and I measured the 3340. The 3340 was producing all waveforms, tracking the keyboard perfectly. But there's no audio at post mix for voice 5 oscillator 3. So what I did there is I looked at the mixer control, made sure that voice was actually getting the voltage, which it should, because they're all parallel. So whenever you turn these knobs, it's actually paralleled across all 6 voices. And sure enough, it was getting the voltage. Another bad 3360. It uses 3360 for your mixer controls on each voice. That's what had happened. You had lost another 3360. So that was 2 dead 3360s. I replaced that 3360. Everything came back to life, and it was all great. Then I started looking at some other things. I started doing some functional testing to make sure other things worked. And I found a weird fault on this one. I could turn the volume control for oscillator 1, and it would work fine. But if I turn the emphasis control, it would affect volume control of oscillator 1. So really weird stuff, some cross communication there. So that's when I went to the digital side and started looking at demux signals, and what I found is you had some dead multiplexing. You had some multiplexing that just wasn't working correctly. So I replaced all the multiplexing circuits, and at this stage I was pretty much just said, alright, we're going to do a restoration, because it's needed, because you started having other little things creep up, little problems, which is not uncommon when I get these things in, especially if they've been setting a while. They tend just to deteriorate faster. So I replaced all the multiplexing circuits. I went on and knocked out the CMOS switching chips related to wave shape control, voice modulation control, recapped all the boards, all the electrolytic capacitors. I didn't focus on like the polyethylene caps, all that, because those rarely fail. And usually I'll see other signs when those fail. But went on to replace all the electrolytic capacitors, full calibration, complete calibration, clean the switches so they work a lot better. You had some switches which weren't functioning correctly at all. And so clean the switches, full calibration, 9-hour burn-in, and it's working fantastic. And I'll show you why I replaced these capacitors, guys. I know a lot of you say, well, why do you replace all electrolytic capacitors? Well, let me show you. I'll just give you a good example here. Let me find a good example. These are all your old capacitors and some chips. You got more chips right here in this, which is some old parts. Now, here's a good example right here. If you look at this leg right here, there's corrosion on it. And what that is, these type of capacitors, electrolytic capacitors, have a dielectric fluid in them. And they have a lifespan. You know, they're not really made to be in there as long as these things have been in there. But what happens is, on the positive side of this cap, that's where they actually put all the guts inside the can, and they seal it with a rubber seal. And what happens is that seal deteriorates, and it starts leaking the fluid out around it. And that fluid is kind of like what happens in a battery. It's fine until it hits oxygen, and once it hits oxygen, it becomes corrosive. And sure enough, that's what happens. It starts leaking out. It starts running down the actual leg of this component, and it can get on the circuit boards and corrode the tracings, and then it's just a nightmare. You have to really clean them, and because they won't even take solder at that point, so you can't even solder new components or desolder in some cases. But luckily we caught these right in time. It hadn't started corroding the tracings yet, but it was getting really close. But anyways, replace these capacitors for that reason. And plus, them having a fluid in there, it does evaporate over a period of time, and you start losing your efficiency of these capacitors. And what happens is they'll check out fine, you know, for you technicians that test these things in circuit, and you're like, okay, well they read fine on a meter. Well, they read fine on the meter, but if you leave them on for like 2 or 3 hours at a time, you'll start seeing them fall out, because that fluid, as it gets warm, it starts evaporating inside the actual canister, and you start losing your efficiency because it's not working correctly. Plus, that dielectric fluid, it's a chemical reaction, and it wears out. It loses its properties of what it actually does. So that's why I changed out these capacitors. Something else I did too for M3 is I replaced the ribbon cable that runs between the expansion board and the digital board. This was a problem as well I ran into after I opened it up. I could move the chassis. For instance, when I open this thing up, this card, the expansion card is actually mounted to the top half of this chassis, and your digital board is mounted to the bottom half. So when you open this thing up, that cable flexes, and I started having glitches in the computer because there's a pin or a wire in this that's been pinched. It's not uncommon. I see that very often because this is actually a shielded ribbon, so it's a little thicker than most ribbons. But when I'll just put a new ribbon in there, I have a guy that manufactures them for me. They work great, and I've been using them for probably about 3 years now, and they do great. So you got a brand new ribbon. Just trying to knock out everything I can that could possibly give you an issue. And so final results are, I cleaned it. That was the final thing I did. I cleaned and detailed the chassis, conditioned the wood, and you can see just how nice this thing looks now. I mean, it wasn't a bad unit to begin with, but you know, just clean it up and just kind of giving it a fresh start on life after all the work. It just kind of makes everything, you know, makes me feel better about it, because this is just something I do out of habit, really. But gave it a good cleaning, and just show you, this is your serial number. This is 2462, and just going to show you I cleaned the back panel real good for you as well. And so I just kind of show you now that everything is actually working. Let me actually plug my camera in right quick. It's fixing to die on me. I'm getting the battery light. It's going to take just a second. Just a second here. Okay, we're good there now. Alright, so anyways, what I'm going to do now, since I kind of showed you everything's been done, I'm going to just give you a good demo here, show you that everything is actually working correctly, show you that all oscillators are working, and so we'll start here. So first of all, as you can hear, this is just this preset one. I actually loaded the factory tape data on it for you. I noticed that you had some memory problems. I also replaced the memory battery with a factory correct battery. They still sell Panasonic BRC batteries here in the States, and so I actually put you the factory Panasonic battery back in this one, so it should be good for another 30 years. But as you can hear, so it's not my best playing hand. You can hear your octave shift works. So as you can hear, all that's working great. Of course, I'll give you more demo here in a minute, but first I just want to show you that the auto tune actually tunes all 6 voices now. Takes a few minutes. So as you can see, it says 6 tuned now. And I'll just kind of show you here. We'll go to debug mode, and I'll show you that everything is actually working. So first of all, I'm going to set it up with all waveforms. We're going to shut off your voice modulation for PWM. Turn these knobs here down. Go here, set up the common waveform there. We'll make this actually from a low frequency to a normal frequency. We'll go and turn up our mixers. We'll actually turn these down. We'll start with oscillator 1. Give it a fast attack. And then we'll go here and make sure it's in cycling mode. It is. C5. Which that's actually what that does. C5 centers these two pots here to 0. So you don't have to actually set these things to 0. And then we'll go C4, enter. And now what we're actually going to do, we're not going to defeat any voices. I'm just going to show you that all voices are working. So we got oscillator 1 turned up, all the other oscillators are down. And as you can hear, and you can see, that's oscillator 1 per voice. Oscillator 2. As you can hear, there's oscillator 2, and then oscillator 3. As you can hear, and that's actually a lower frequency, so if we go here, you can hear it's equal to the other ones. We turn all 3 oscillators up. As you can hear, it's working great. So that's all your voices are working. Go back here and exit out of this. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put the camera on the tripod. I'll walk you through some of the sounds, just kind of show you that everything is actually functioning as far as envelope generators, filter, etc. So let me put the camera on the tripod here. There we go. And I'm just going to kind of walk you through. So we'll reset preset 1. Okay, that's preset 1. Preset 2. Your pitch bend works. Your mono section works. Probably sounds a little out of tune because this preset actually has the oscillators offset. So I'm just going to hit C5. That centers all the oscillators. You can hear it now, it sounds. So you can hear. Glide works. And we've got a mono mode. So you can hear the glides working there. Something I will show you I just like to do is when you go into a polyphonic section and you get a long glide per voice and you hit mono button and you hit a key, it pulls all those glides in and it sounds like this right here. Just one of my favorite effects of the Memorymoog. That's preset 2, preset 3. Preset 4, preset 5. And what that's actually doing is using oscillator 3 as the LFO source, and it's tracking the keyboards. That's why you hear the different modulations per key track. I will go and show you one of my favorite presets here, 21. This is just one of my favorite pads. Really great sounding pad. what we will do, though. I don't want to go through all the presets because I got plenty of videos on all these presets. I'm just going to go back to 2 and I'll show you that the actual sequencer is working. I loaded the factory tape data for your sequencer. It's just kind of demo data that was put on the Memorymoog. So to get into the sequencer, for anybody that don't know, you have to hit CC, enter. Of your keypad. Now this section here is now looking at your sequencer, not your modulation sources. So we'll start here, and I'm just going to show you that how this sounds. So here we go. So as you can hear, that's a good example. We'll set a fast attack for this next one. We got some of the Who in here. So we'll go here. So anyways, you can hear your sequencers working. We go back here to CC enter. That puts us back in the modulation source, which we can now control. That says you just control PWM, pulse width modulation of oscillator 1 and 2 there. Anyways, that's your sequencer section, your modulation section. I'll show you that the envelope generators work, the filter works. I calibrated all filters per voice, so they're all balanced between the voices. That's the big thing that sets this thing apart from like a Memorymoog, is because each voice has its own filter, so it doesn't quite have that one filter, you know, per all audio signals. So it's a little different. So what we'll do, we'll put on key tracking. We'll go here. We'll try to tune it there. There we go, that's pretty close. That's just the filter. What I like to do here is I like to put on like a sequence. Let's tune it just a little bit more. Works, and that's just your filter. Wish this thing had a 440 hertz reference like a Memorymoog that you could turn on and tune that filter. It'd be a lot handier. But you can hear your filters actually. It's tracking the keyboard. Just make it have all 6 voices. We'll hit 6 notes. So as you can hear, and that's just your filter. So now we'll go through your envelopes. I'll show you that all the envelopes are working. So we'll turn the oscillators back up. So we'll start with the VCF filter. VCF envelope generator. So there's that, and then we also got the attack. that's working. We also got the release time, which we'll have to release time. Now we'll go to your actual voltage controlled amplifier envelope generator. So we'll go here, we'll make it have a really fast decay, as you can hear. Slow attack. As you go here, open that filter up. As you can hear, and actually what you're hearing there, because I hit the notes at different times, so the different times are there actually in each envelope. You got an envelope per voice. 2 envelopes, one for VCL, one for VCA, so they actually can follow the keys. You can also set your sustain level, so if you don't want it to completely die out after the decay, you can kind of hear that. It's also a good way to get some of those little clicks. Of course, then we got the release time, which we'll turn up. As you can hear, that's your release time. And so that's working correctly. But pretty much everything's working like it should. I'll go through some more presets here, just a few. That's an example of oscillator sync. This is one of my favorites too. It's like a bell. This actually sample and hold. And what that's actually doing there is sample and hold with frequency 2, but it's got an oscillator sync on it. So you got this oscillator sync of oscillator 2 and 1, and it's changing the frequency of oscillator 2. So you get that. If we cut off the sync button, it sounds like that. So anyways, as you can hear, this thing's working great. But I just want to take a minute, make you a little video just to kind of show you the overview of this thing, show you that everything is actually functioning correctly. But once again, I appreciate you letting me service this thing for you, M3. It's been a real pleasure getting this thing going for you. And for anybody else watching the video, thanks for watching. Really appreciate all the support. And there'll be more to come. But take care. you